There's a lot I need to cover. I know people are here to get help for their baby, but at the same time too, I need to put out content. One of the contents I've been working on, and it really is a bear in a good way, is my reflex courses. And one of the reflexes that's not talked about, and there's stages to it, is the gravitational reflexes. A reflex is a response to stimuli. Well, gravity takes hold or is introduced to our system from birth, and it stays with us to the day we die. And there's different stages on how a baby now responds to gravity as part of its development. Now, some people think that this is just getting into too scientific, but if you really want to understand development, you have to understand how the body responds in space. So when the baby is in the fetus, right, it's a fetal neutral gravity response. So in other words, there's very little responses to gravity due to the amniotic fluid, and that there's no intake or elimination. We're not breathing and we're not exhaling, we're not intaking food, we're not eliminating. Those things, if they happen during the womb, can be life-threatening to your child. They're not meant to there, and you're in amniotic fluid. So the objective in the womb's environment in relationship to gravity is to be able to respond in all directions in a neutral base, right? So the brain, the heart, everything, the body, the spine, it's not about the uncurling and all of this sort of things. It's the ability to expand in all directions without friction. When there's friction in the room, we're going to have issues with development. The most obvious, let's say, would be like arthrogryposis, or a lot of DNA kiddos, especially muscular dystrophy. I hear like how the parents' hips hurt, the pubic bone, all of this, because the baby is literally sinking in this environment. And this environment is very true to our neurological responses, because this is what happens to astronauts when they go into outer space. When they're in outer space, there's no gravity. So their system neurologically goes into this movement and expands in all directions. And it grows like in development. And you see this again with the Kelly twins. They're no longer twins because the DNA ripped, it split. They're no longer, and they're like, we can't even explain it. I'm like, well, it's obvious why it happened, right? Because he was up there too long, and his DNA kept growing in that sense. And because there's no rotation in outer space, again, there's no rotation in the womb either. That's where you start having these. So now you're going into the breathing reflex. So breathing reflex is really misunderstood because they think it's a reflex that just starts your breathing. And that's not really how it works. Breathing can't happen without gravity. This is where, too, if we think we're going to procreate in outer space, good luck with that one. If, again, that they don't understand these principles, because you can't just birth into a non-gravity field, because then there's no birth. Right? This is why they can't grow plants in outer space, because they don't realize they're missing the Earth's rotation and that opposition to gravity. And it doesn't matter if you're a seed or you're a baby, that's where you come out. So the breath reflex to gravity is really important, because that's the first time you're opposing gravity, right? Depending on where you're positioned in the body. In space. So in other words, when you were in tummy time, or you being swaddled, or all that sort of thing, or did you not breathe at birth? I can tell you right now, any baby that did not have a good respiratory response at birth, or it was compromised in the first 3 months of birth, without some form of therapy, you're not walking. Why? If you can't oppose gravity in breath, you're not going to oppose gravity in walking. So any baby that really has a respiratory distress needs to start some kind of program immediately after birth. And this is one of the biggest gaps. And then you see the severity coming in with, let's say, cerebral palsy, because you have oxygen deprivation. You didn't get the first breath. Those are two separate functions neurologically within the human body. And then possibly brain damage. A third separate section within the human body, because any damage to the brain now succumbs, because now that's dead mass, succumbs to gravity versus opposed to gravity. And this is where a child is not born with dystonic or ataxia and all that kind of thing. They get it later on, or they start developing it, because the parts that have died within the human body want to succumb to gravity just like an inanimate mass would do, and the rest of it wants to oppose gravity, and it throws off from weight transfer and counterbalance transitional skills into counter-oppositional movements. When a baby is showing counter-oppositional movements, you might say it's stiff and so forth like that. That's where the cerebral palsy, it's starting to develop into its form of cerebral palsy. The cerebral palsy has happened because there's been damage to the brain. That's a given. But it's how its effect now on the body is based off of these principles. So then you're going into what I call the absolute horizon, right? The absolute horizon is when the spine is actually, and all the bones are articulating for the first time, and any stimuli, they're just responding to individually, right? This is where the spine and the cells are collecting oxygen and releasing oxygen. And so that's why when you're hugging your baby, you know what I mean? They're supposed to be just sort of like snuggling you back. You almost feel like they're touching you with their whole body, which in a sense that they are. Again, when these phenomenons are not observed by the parent or professional, again, this is where the breakdown is, or the deviations of these developments need to come into play immediately, meaning through some form of interaction for movement responses, so the body can start doing it. When a body is sort of blown out of the water with its rotational responses or its responses to gravity, it's almost like a CPR. Now, the CPR, again, if any organ fails in your body, you better have someone there to help you out, because you cannot restart your own heart, right? Well, I look at certain movements as the same thing. When movements have gone into failure, you better have someone there to bring those movements back. You know, like if you've just had a stroke, you know, you mean like you need to come to me, because I'm one of those great initiators, and I can get people back. If I get to you soon enough, I can really get the symptoms of the stroke out of your system. But again, it depends on the person, and we go from there. So now from the absolute horizon kind of reflex, gravity reflexes, we're going into the airplane mode, where you're picking your baby up, and your baby is really learning how to breathe through the spine, through the back. So when the spine's in tummy time, right, again, the breathing and all of these, the spine is doing amazing things during this, or the skeletal system is doing incredible things. But we, at this point, are looking at external markers for development, which are important too, but it's how the person develops into that. So now going into, again, when a child needs or has to have surgery early on, the reason that's significant is because our skin, our epidermis, is our gravity regulator. Very similar to sleeping on a bed of nails, which is one thing I'm not going to demo on, versus sleeping on one nail. So the premise is if I sleep on a bunch of nails, the weight is distributed throughout, or the pressure, and so the nails don't poke me. But if I have one nail, it'll go through my system. I believe the reason surgery hurts so much is because that cut is now exposed, that area to the body, to gravity, and gravity's literally like poking it, and you're not used to that sensation, and it hurts, right? A simple paper cut can take you out, you know what I mean? Because you've expose that area of the system to gravity and the forces of gravity. The epidermis is allowing that gravity, when we do all of these kind of movements, to regulate around our system. The body is really interesting, and this goes into where I show you how to work with the water as our system. Now, the problem with me demonstrating on water is water acts like an inanimate object. It's mass. I cannot work on something that you can see through it, that it's going to respond like any living organism, because water or anything that I work on is not going to oppose gravity, especially with rotational responses. And so doing demos sometimes is quite difficult, because I can't get my point across for you to visualize. Now, I can visualize down to a cellular level. I'm weird, but I've been doing this for a long time. Most people only visualize for what they can see. a topical visualization, not how a baby or you are structured for movement. This is why I don't look at pictures or blah, 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 or reports. I want to see the images of the x-ray. I want to see videos of your child moving. And so when these 4 key aspects of gravitational reflexes are interrupted, especially going into surgery, okay, this is where it takes a little bit of finesse, or that you're working with someone that's a tad more advanced to reinstate these aspects. The younger the baby is getting surgery, the more that this is becoming, in a sense, a trauma to the system. Even if it's not surgery, like prolonged phototherapy or infections, these 4 aspects of gravitational reflexes will be interrupted or deviated. And it will deviate. If you deviate on gravitational reflexes, you're going to deviate on development. And that's something to consider. Now, I'm the only one that presents gravitational reflexes, so that's something that you're going to have to stick with me to learn more about. And I'm going to be doing a series about this because I've got a baby in with a spinal tether and had to have surgery. I could not this baby's not moving. And I know that the child was concerned for fisted hand. And the fisted hands are the least of my concerns because I couldn't understand the lack of movement. Finally finding out about the surgery. So I'll be covering that live. But I really wanted to have that bit of continuity that you can start understanding really what a true reflex is. So when people are doing reflex integration and they're not considering this aspect of possibly trauma or deviations to their child, you can do typical or standard, not mine, but reflex integration to the cows come home, and you're just not going to get the results that you are looking for. And that's what also, too, that these people that are the professionals in it get perplexed that, oh, but it works for Susie and not for Johnny. Well, you know, I mean, Johnny had more of a birth issue. And that's where I really changed as a mom, as well as becoming a practitioner, because I got so tired of everybody telling me it was my son's fault. I get it that my son is responding to movement with these aspects of lack of walking, lack of talking. What am I going to do about it to facilitate it that his system can restart or kick back in? And that's where I really developed what I do and my touch. And so there are some aspects of development. Guys, I was a mom first, and I learned and taught myself how to do all of this. You can do it too. I never present this work like it's my way or the highway and come to me or only me. Now, if you come to me, you're going to get that kind of results much quicker because I go right to it. I don't have the insecurities of working with a child. You've never done it before. Of course you're going to have insecurities. I've been doing this for not only for years, but flipping hours like you wouldn't believe. So I just have a wide range. I work on professional football players all the way down to a child that's been in the NICU, you know, and in hospitalizations for over 100 days and has had 3 surgeries. I've worked with people that have had half a brain. I get it. I go hardcore, but I learn from everybody, right? And that's why I do these open reviews so you can learn. And not only that, it brings some people out of the closet that have been watching and the trolls and they're not doing anything to help their child, but they are looking for that one child that they can relate to. That's not the way development is. Everybody organizes movement differently, and that's okay. But that aspect of thought really messes up the babies because that's where like, oh, but they're a baby, they'll figure it out. No, it doesn't work that way. First of all, if a baby is deviating over after specific time dictated development, that again, I have the 12 months of milestones, that baby's in trouble. And so first of all, you have to evaluate that child, why they're in trouble. But for these conversations of I'm waiting to see if I have CP, well, if there's damage to the brain or oxygen deprivation, you do have it. It's at what degree. If those words are coming out of your mouth, you better be working on your child. You know, if at the end of the day you say, oh, but it wasn't cerebral palsy, you pee, but you're still working on the movements.